Everybody, listen closely because this next weather pattern is going to catch a lot of people completely off guard. We are heading into one of the biggest flips of the entire summer, and if you don't prepare now, you're going to be caught in the middle of it. I've been tracking this for days, watching the models shift, watching the ensembles line up, and I can tell you with confidence that what's coming is not just another ordinary stretch of weather. This is a real pattern change, and it's going to unfold in two distinct phases, one right after the other, so stick with me while I break down exactly what's happening, when it's happening, and why so many people are going to be surprised by it. Right now, we are sitting in what's called a negative East Pacific Oscillation, or EPO for short. I know that sounds technical, but stay with me, because this is the key to understanding everything else in this forecast. When we're in this negative phase, what happens is we get these little pulses of cooler air trying to sneak in, mostly overnight, mostly across the northern tier of the country. You might notice it yourself, waking up to a slightly cooler morning, maybe even needing a light jacket for a few minutes before the sun comes up. But then, almost like clockwork, the heat comes right back during the day. That's because this particular phase of the EPO keeps reinforcing the warmth from the central states all the way to the eastern seaboard. So even though you're getting these brief tastes of cooler air, the underlying pattern just resets itself every single day, pulling the heat right back in like a rubber band snapping into place. This is exactly why so many of you have been messaging me, confused about the timing. You heard me talk about cooler air coming, you felt it for a night or two, and then boom, you're right back in the 80s and 90s wondering what happened. The cooler nights are real, but they are not the main event. They are just a preview of what's coming later. The real transition, the one that actually sticks, is still ahead of us, and it comes in two waves. The first wave is actually going to bring more heat before things cool down. As we move into the middle of August, somewhere around the 17th and 18th, the models are showing a shift toward a positive EPO. Almost every major model agrees on this, the ensembles are lining up, and honestly, the only outlier right now is the GFS, which tends to run a little different from the pack anyway. When we flip into this positive phase, we get strong ridging building up, and that ridging is going to sit right over the central and eastern United States. Ridging basically means high pressure building and strengthening, acting like a dome that traps heat underneath it and keeps storm systems from pushing through. So instead of getting relief, we're actually going to see one more surge of intense heat before the real cool down arrives. Think of it like this. Imagine you're walking toward a door that leads outside into cooler air, but right before you get there, someone cranks the thermostat up one more time just to make you sweat a little more. That's essentially what this positive EPO phase is going to do. It's the last gasp of summer heat, and it's going to be a strong one. We're talking about heat indices climbing well past 100 degrees, especially across the south and the southeast, and where the ridging is centered. Some feels like temperatures could push into the 110 to 115 range, because the dew points are still going to be elevated, making the air feel thick even where actual temperatures aren't record-breaking. Now here's something that puts this all into perspective. Last July was not just a hot month, it was officially the hottest month ever recorded in the United States since we started keeping temperature records. So when I tell you that we've got one more round of significant heat building before this pattern flips, I want you to understand that this isn't some minor blip. This is a legitimate, dangerous heat event layered on top of a summer that's already broken records. If you have outdoor plans, if you have elderly relatives, if you have pets that spend time outside, this is the window where you need to be extra careful. Hydration matters. Shade matters. Checking on your neighbors matters, especially anyone who might not have reliable air conditioning. This heat is going to be most intense as we move from around the 18th through the 21st. During this stretch, the ridging is going to grow and expand, and it's not staying in one place either. It started out centered more over the central and south central states, but the latest trends show it pushing further into the southeast as well. That's the nature of these patterns. They're never static. They're always shifting, which is exactly why I keep telling you to stay updated rather than locking in on one forecast and assuming it won't change. Weather patterns breathe and move, and this one is doing exactly that right now. Along with the heat, we're also watching a growing concern for drought conditions. As this ridge sits and strengthens, it blocks off moisture and rainfall, and we're already seeing the footprint of onset drought risk stretching down through Mississippi and Louisiana. In the areas marked with the highest concern, that drought risk could not only continue, it could actually worsen. So if you're in the Gulf South, this isn't just about uncomfortable heat. This is about water resources, about agriculture, about the health of the land itself heading into what's already been a scorching summer. But even during this heat surge, remember, we're still going to get those brief cool fronts pushing across the northern half of the country. The Great Lakes, parts of Ohio Valley, and the interior Northeast are going to keep getting these overnight dips, temperatures pushing down into the 50s and 60s for a few hours before the sun comes up and the heat reasserts itself. It's a strange rhythm, cool overnight, hot by afternoon, over and over again, almost like the atmosphere can't quite decide which season it wants to commit to. That indecision is going to continue through the rest of this week and into the weekend, with the reinforced heat pattern showing up loud and clear during the daytime hours, while those cooler pulses sneak in after dark. Now let's talk about what happens after this heat surge finally breaks, because this is the part that's really going to catch people off guard. Once we move past this positive EPO phase, somewhere around the 22nd of the month, we transition into a negative EPO. Again, but this time it's a completely different kind of negative phase than what we've experienced so far this summer. This next negative phase is going to bring ridging that builds up toward Alaska instead of sitting over the central United States. When that happens, the storm track and the cool air get pushed much further south and much deeper into the central and eastern parts of the country. And here's the critical difference from what we've seen all summer long. This time, the heat does not reinforce itself day after day. The rubber band doesn't snap back. The cool air actually sticks. This is the pattern flip I keep emphasizing, because it's genuinely different from the false starts we've had before. All those nights where you felt a little chill and then lost it by lunchtime, this time won't work that way. Once this transition locks in, you're going to see actual sustained cooler temperatures, not just a few hours of relief before the heat crashes back in. Daytime highs across a wide stretch of the country are going to fall into the 60s and 70s, which for the middle to end of August is a genuinely significant drop. Overnight lows could dip into the 50s, the 40s, and in some spots, we're even watching for the possibility of some low overnight readings that feel more like early autumn than the peak of summer. I know that might sound hard to believe right now while you're still sweating through heat indices past 100 degrees, but this is why I wanted to walk you through both phases together. The heat is not going away forever. It's just delaying the inevitable one more time before this bigger change finally takes hold. And when it does, it's not going to be subtle. We could see a real cold front punch down into the country, potentially reaching as far south as Texas. And some extended data even hints at cooler anomalies stretching toward Mexico, Cuba, the Yucatan, and Florida. That's still more than 10 days out, so I won't give you exact numbers for those far southern areas with full confidence. But when multiple model runs keep pointing the same direction, it's worth paying attention to. Let's walk through this weekend and into next week so you have a clearer picture of the day-to-day rhythm before that bigger flip arrives. For the tail end of this week, you're going to keep seeing that pattern of cooler troughing dipping across the northern half of the lower 48, touching the Great Lakes, parts of Ohio Valley, and the interior Northeast. But just like before, the heat reinforcement kicks back in every single day. So if you're in the cooler zone overnight, don't get too comfortable, because you're heading right back into the 70s and 80s, maybe even the 80s, creeping toward 90 by the afternoon. Moving into the weekend itself, the jet stream is going to keep doing this back and forth dance, dipping south to bring in a round of cooler air overnight, and then lifting back north during the day to let the heat return. Saturday into Sunday follows the same script. Cooler pulses overnight, giving way to warm, muggy afternoons with dew points that make the air feel heavier than the actual temperature would suggest. Sunday night into Monday, we see those overnight lows drop again, especially across the north-central states, the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and the Great Lakes, but once again, it's a short-lived dip before the reinforced heat takes back over during the day. As we move deeper into next week, this is where the positive EPO phase really takes hold and the heat becomes the dominant story. We're talking about heat indices potentially reaching into that 110 to 115 range in some areas, and this stretch could last for essentially the entire week. This is the peak of the second heat surge I mentioned earlier, and it's going to be intense, especially across the south and southeast where the ridging is strongest. If you've been dealing with heat fatigue all summer, I know this news isn't what you want to hear, but knowing it's coming means you can prepare, adjust your outdoor plans, and take the necessary precautions before it arrives. Then, right on schedule, next Saturday brings the front everyone has been waiting for. This is the one that could bring down not just the 60s, but potentially the 50s, and in some spots, even the 40s. This lines up with that pattern shift around the 22nd, and it's the clearest signal yet that the real transition out of summer heat and into a more autumn-like feel is finally arriving. Once we're on the other side of this front, the wavy pattern of the negative EPO takes over, and that's going to mean a more consistent stretch of cool fronts pushing through the end of August and carrying right on into September. Now, before we move away from the temperature pattern, I do want to touch on the tropics, because there's a lot happening out there too, and it ties into this overall pattern of change. We're watching a tropical wave that's still elongated and just now coming off the coast of Africa. Right now, the chances sit around 30% in the next 48 hours and about 70% over the next 7 days. The confidence on its eventual track is still fairly low, because it depends heavily on how strong the system becomes. If it strengthens, it's more likely to get pulled northward by high pressure once a trough opens up a path for it. If it stays weaker, the trend has been for it to track further west, and in that scenario it's more likely to get disrupted by dry air, which could limit how much it's able to organize. If it does track into the Caribbean, that could bring beneficial rainfall to the Lesser Antilles, and if the stronger scenario plays out with it curving northward, Bermuda would need to keep an eye on it as a potential concern. There's also a second wave right behind the first one that hasn't fully come off the African coast yet. Both the Canadian and European models trend toward these systems moving westward as weaker disturbances, mostly bringing rainfall rather than a major wind threat. It's worth watching, but not raising alarm bells for direct U.S. impacts. The system getting more attention right now is out in the Pacific, designated as an invest with a 90% chance of development over the next 7 days. This one is trending toward a more direct track toward Hawaii, with increasing confidence that it arrives sometime between Friday and Saturday. The good news, if you want to call it that, is the intensity forecast has come down somewhat. So we're looking at more of a tropical storm level system rather than something stronger. If it takes a more northern route, it would likely weaken further as it moves over cooler waters. But regardless of the exact strength, this system is expected to bring significant rainfall, potentially 6 to 8 inches in a lot of areas, and even higher totals, possibly exceeding a foot in some spots, along with wind gusts that could range anywhere from 60 to 70 miles per hour, with isolated pockets seeing gusts near 80, possibly even approaching 90 or 100 miles per hour in the strongest cores. If you have connections to Hawaii, or if you're traveling there in the coming days, this is absolutely something to stay updated on. Switching gears to the severe weather threat that's more immediate, we've already seen significant impacts from powerful winds moving through parts of the country. Reports came in of a tornado in South Dakota, along with widespread wind damage that has knocked out power to a large number of homes. At last count, Ohio alone had over 180,000 homes without power, with West Virginia and Virginia each seeing more than 20,000 outages, and even California reporting around 12,000 homes affected. Altogether, we're looking at more than 300,000 homes without power, and with additional rounds of wind expected today and into tomorrow, that number is likely to climb even higher before things settle down. For today specifically, the tornado threat remains relatively low, sitting around 2%, but the wind threat is the bigger story. We're watching for the potential of significant severe weather capable of producing wind gusts up to 85 miles per hour in the most intense areas. That's an incredibly dangerous number, capable of snapping trees, downing power lines, and causing structural damage. So if you're in the affected zone, please take this seriously. There's also a hail threat across the north-central states, with the potential for hail up to 2 inches in diameter, which is large enough to cause real damage to vehicles, roofing, and anything left outside. The way this is expected to play out through the day involves multiple rounds of storms. We'll see activity continuing across Ohio and pushing into northern Indiana and northern Illinois through the early afternoon, with another round developing over Ohio again by the evening. At the same time, storms will be building out west across the Four Corners region and into Nevada, along with development over South Dakota, where we could see more discrete, powerful supercells capable of producing hail and an isolated risk of quick spin-up tornadoes. Overnight, the severe weather threat shifts eastward, stretching from West Virginia through Kentucky, Virginia, and North Carolina, with winds remaining the primary concern. Yet another round is expected to fire back up across Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky as we move through the overnight hours and into the following morning. Tomorrow, the pattern essentially repeats itself, with renewed storm development sparking up again across northern Illinois and northern Indiana, bringing another round of strong, damaging winds that stretch back through Kentucky. Meanwhile, additional storms will continue developing across the central and north-central states, as well as the Four Corners region. In terms of specific wind numbers, we're expecting gusts in the range of 50 to 70 miles per hour across the western Dakotas, with Nebraska seeing gusts closer to 40 miles per hour. Out west, Southern California could see brief gusts around 50 to 60 miles per hour with passing storms, while Nevada looks at gusts in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range. But the strongest and most widespread wind threat remains centered over the Ohio Valley, where this activity is expected to continue essentially all night long and into the early morning hours. Looking at the broader wind footprint, we're talking about large areas seeing sustained gusts of 40 to 60 miles per hour, with pockets reaching 70 miles per hour across northern Illinois and Indiana, and isolated spots potentially seeing gusts as high as 80 miles per hour. This is a widespread and serious wind event, and if you live in this corridor, please take precautions now rather than waiting until the storms are already on top of you. Secure loose outdoor items, know where you'll take shelter if warnings are issued, make sure your phone is charged in case you lose power. For Wednesday, the tornado threat shifts slightly, with Illinois and Indiana under watch for the possibility of a spin-up tornado, though the primary threat once again remains damaging straight-line winds. This has honestly been a multi-day story now, with the same general corridor seeing repeated rounds of severe weather, and some of these storm cells have shown signs of becoming tornadic, particularly across northern Illinois, where strong winds have followed closely behind. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. We are in the middle of a genuine pattern transition, and it's unfolding in stages. Right now, we're still locked into that reinforced heat pattern with brief, cooler pulses overnight that don't stick. Over the next several days, we're going to see one more significant surge of heat as the EPO flips positive, bringing dangerous heat index values, particularly across the south and southeast, along with a growing drought concern in parts of the Gulf South. Then, right around the 22nd of the month, we finally get the pattern flip that actually sticks, bringing a real cool down with lasting cooler temperatures pushing into the central and eastern United States as we head toward the end of August and into September. On top of all that, we've got an active tropic situation to watch, with a system trending toward a direct impact on Hawaii by the end of the week, bringing heavy rainfall and strong winds, along with a couple of weaker disturbances in the Atlantic that are worth monitoring but don't currently pose a major threat. And closer to home right now, today and tomorrow, the severe weather threat is very real, with damaging winds up to 85 miles per hour possible, large hail, and an ongoing risk of power outages that has already affected hundreds of thousands of homes. I know that's a lot to take in, but I wanted to give you the complete picture so you're not caught off guard. This is exactly why I keep saying weather patterns are always moving, and the forecast you see today might look a little different in a few days as new data comes in. That's not me being wrong. That's just how meteorology works with a pattern this dynamic. I'll keep tracking every update, and I'll make sure you're the first to know when anything changes. Stay hydrated during this next heat surge, stay alert during these ongoing severe weather rounds, and get ready because that real cool down is coming. And when it arrives, you're going to feel the difference immediately. Please check on your neighbors, check on anyone who might be vulnerable to this heat, and if you're in the path of these storms, take the warning seriously. Stay weather aware, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next update with everything you need to know.